This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I want to give a shout out to Jimmy Corham, my producer, and Comedy Trainwreck. And, our guest today, it's funny. I was thinking it was 12 years ago when I still record Cooper Talk, but I was recording it in Burbank. And I reached out to my guest because she's such an amazing comedian. And she got back to me and she did my show. And when she got there, my second guest canceled and she did 2 hours with me. And I was looking at my website and her episode was from 2012, her first episode. It was episode 16, and now I'm at episode 1026. And she's been on my show so many times. So she came on my new show because she's such a funny person and she has lots of stories. And my guest is Wendy Liebman. How you doing, Wendy?
You just threw out so many numbers at me. that, I remember that coming to your Burbank studio like it was a minute ago, and I can't believe it was 12 years ago. And because of your podcast, or was it a podcast or a TV or a radio show? Was it a podcast?
It was an internet radio show that went to a podcast. I sent it to my website after.
Because of that, I have always felt like if you just reach out to somebody, who knows, they might reach back to you, and to take chances. So you really inspired me. And I don't know what it was that you wrote to me or whatever, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So thank you for having me on all those times, and also for having me on today.
Well, it's funny. Your husband, Jeffrey, was on, and that was a week before I went into the hospital with congestive heart failure. And I told him that I felt like crap. And after, he said, yeah, you didn't look that good. And I think that same day, I had Bill Dwyer on, and I think Mark Valley. And they both thought I was just like, they didn't know, but I ended up getting sick. And I remember because I was in the studio and I was like, and then I ended up like a week later, I was in a hospital, which was funny, was right next to the studio. So it all worked out.
I do remember that did he encourage you to go to the hospital or get checked out? Or
I think he basically said, I said I wasn't feeling good. And I think he said, you basically, we're not getting any younger, so go get checked out. So
right. And you've been doing amazing since that time. And You eat so healthfully now. I'm drinking a broccoli shake, by the way. It's broccoli, but it has chocolate in it.
Dark chocolate. Dark chocolate's good.
No, it's protein, chocolate protein, and a banana. I'm pretending to eat healthy.
Exactly. I want to start the show. We have so much to talk about, but you on Facebook have done something that you really pulled the comedy community together. And we're talking people from, you'll get a Kathy Liebman, you'll get a Larry Ambrose, and you'll get like an open micer. You came up with this. How'd you come up with the idea where you put up every day, and you do it every day religiously, which is great. You put up a premise, and then you put up a few of your jokes, and then everyone just jumps on it. Like if you see it, I'm always like, and I always get happy when you give a like, or if someone says, I get a few people that like it, I'm like, all right, that's a good joke. But how'd you come up with the idea? And did you think people would jump on it like they have?
So, okay, there's a real origin to how this evolved. I have so many books in my office, and I don't read them. I've read the titles, but I don't read the books. So I thought each day I'm going to read a page from a book and try to make a joke about it. And then one of my books is by Gene Perrett, who was like Bob Hope's writer and Phyllis Stiller's writer. And I'm friends with his daughter, Linda Perrett.
Let me interrupt. One second. I remember years ago when I was starting comedy, I got the Gene Perrett roundtable. And I remember one of my jokes made it. And I was like ecstatic. I was like, holy shit, I made Gene Perrett. And I'm friends with his daughter too. But that's funny when you said that, because he was such an influential writer. And so many comics of our generation know who he was, because he was the person who was really, he was a joke writer. He wrote for everybody.
And And he came to one of my shows once I was on the show with Jimmy Brogan, and afterwards his daughter wrote to me, and I guess Jimmy was, you know how Jimmy talks to the audience. So Jimmy Brogan was talking to this guy, Gene Parrott, who was a comedy writer. And I'm like, I know who that is. I had met him once before when I was on a show with Bob Hope. And I became friends with him. So he would come to a lot of my shows. And anyway, so I have one of his books, always loved him. And the book is like about comedy writing. And he would give you a premise and tell you to go write some jokes about that premise. And so I really turned that into my Facebook page prompts. So it's today's joke writing prompt. And I don't do it every day, Steve. I just want to say, like, I try to do it every day, but it's really hard to keep up because I read every answer. And I, like, for example, yesterday's was my mother told me not to talk to strangers, ... And then some of my jokes were, so I stopped talking to my mother, or this is why I'm single, and then 200 people will pipe in. And actually yesterday's was, they say you can sleep when you're dead. ...
And I wrote, but when you're dead, can you sleep? And I wrote, that was my response.
I loved that. Hope, yeah.
Okay. No, I was going to say, what's great about it is when you see it, because you know how it is, like, you don't want to be known as a hack. You know, you have to scan the list to make sure, like, no one else has done your joke, because no matter what people say, there is joke stealing, but there's also a lot of parallel thinking. So I always sit there,
absolutely.
And so when I think of something that sounds too obvious, I go, because you had one about I loved kindergarten, and I wrote, I loved kindergarten, but I despise Garten. And I said,
right.
no one's going to be writing that. And that's the thing, because yours, and then you get some of the nuggets because you're putting it away. So then you steer everyone. But I think it's a great vehicle, because it really spurs creativity and people. I mean, there's some that aren't good. I mean, that's all right. You can't help that, but everyone just does it, and it's supportive, and that's what's important.
I love doing it. And people have come up to me and at parties, and even though I don't even know them or they don't even contribute, they say it's so much fun to read your page of, because I leave it open, not just people I'm friends with. And I have it running simultaneously, once on my personal page and once on my professional page. So I get different answers. It's really interesting. I would love to turn it into like a New Yorker type captioning contest. And I reached out to Reader's Digest, and they seemed interested for a minute. Oh no, I reached out to AARP, but and they seemed interested for a minute, but then I never heard back. But I think it would be a great, like, pay or column, or, you know, like, just once a week have a contest, and then I pick the quote unquote winners. I mean, so many are so good that I just started writing winners on a lot of them because I can't decide. So like the other day I wrote, all of these are winners, I can't pick.
Well, I'm always, it makes me smile when I get a winner. I go, yes, I got a winner.
I know.
It's validation. Because yeah, and from you're the consummate pro. Now the jokes you write, though, do you use them on stage, or do you feel that too many people have already seen it? Like when you do your setup, you know, because I know how you write and I know your delivery. Do you use any of them on stage, or are you worried that someone may have sat there and like followed you and already knows the punchline? So I'm just wondering.
I will try anything on stage. I feel the ratio of people who have heard the joke before or have seen it on Facebook, it's not a problem. Like even if I tell it and they know the punchline, I think I can get away with it. I mean, people have told me in general, they've seen my jokes before, they've seen my act before, but they still laugh. So I'm going with that one, Steve.
Okay. Well, when did you know? Real quick, here's someone who's a big fan of yours. He did Cooper Talk, and we talked about you. Was Craig Bierko, and his
Oh,
mom,
I love
somehow
Craig.
he somehow knows his mom knows your mom, but he's like, and he's saying to me, he's like, I can't believe my mom knows Wendy Liebman's mom, and she never said she knew Wendy Liebman's mom, and that's just because that's you. I mean, you have a big following. I think you have a bigger following than you have.
Oh my God, Craig Bierko's mother and I went to summer camp. I mean, my mother and his mother went to summer camp together. And I'd always heard about her because she has like a funky nickname. It was Punky. And then just years later, my mother was taking my niece and nephew to see him on Broadway as the Music Man. And I was like, I know people who know him. And so we just became friends. And then I finally got to meet him once. But can I swear on this?
Yeah.
I fucking love Craig Bierko.
Oh, he's great. He's the nicest guy. And it's funny because he was telling me about the strike before it even happened. He's got a good passion. He's just so talented. So I want to talk about talent. I want to ask you, because we haven't talked about this for a long time. When did you know that you could write funny? Like, you got, I don't know how old you were when you got into stand-up, but you went to Emerson, right?
No,
Oh,
I was in Boston.
Okay.
So I went to Wellesley.
Okay. So when did you decide to do stand-up? And when did you find your style? Because you have a style that, I've seen younger acts, they emulate you. I was working with one girl and I thought she was sort of a jerk. And I was going to say, oh yeah, I saw it the first time when it was funny and it was Wendy Liebman, but I didn't say that because I'm nice. But when did you start writing and when did you find your style? Because you have anyone you talk to that knows you have a distinct style. And in comedy, that's so important because you've carved a niche out.
Well, I was going to be a therapist. I'm still thinking about it. And I got the mail from I probably told you this story already, but I took the mail in from the wrong apartment. And in it was a catalog for a night school. And one of the classes was acting. And so I'd always been an actress growing up. I was Eliza in My Fair Lady in high school and Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz at camp. And so, but I steered away from that in college because I thought I had to get serious. So I saw acting and I was like, you know what? I still want to try that. So I took the acting class and the teacher quit at the break. Like there was a break and he didn't come back. So they told us to take another class and I saw how to be a stand-up comedian and it was like lights and angels singing and I just was like over the moon. I thought this is for me. I don't know why I didn't see that class before. And I took the class with this guy named Ron Lynch, who is still a friend and has made a very nice career for himself here in LA. He's been on the Sarah Silverman program and he runs a show called Saturday Night. It's at midnight and he's just the greatest guy. And so he really took me under his wing. And it wasn't until I started watching the comedian. I mean, I was always funny, but my style developed as a result of me not wanting to be on stage without getting in silence. And I would watch Kevin Meaney and Don Gavin and Jonathan Katz and Bill Broadus and Brian Kiley and Laura Keitlinger. And I just sort of when you're a quote unquote artist, you look at your peers or your contemporaries and you sort of assimilate what they're doing and then make it your own. That's what I think anyway. And so I remember watching Kevin Meaney one night, the late great Kevin Meaney, and he was just on a roll. And I said, I want to do that. And so I would add a tagline. And Um, I think I've changed over the years. Like I used to just never shut up and just talk and talk and talk. And now I'm too tired to do that. So I'm a little slower,
Well,
but
no,
I still like giving you the second punch. And I remember hearing Phyllis Diller on a talk show in like the 70s saying it was like Merv Griffin or Mike Douglas. And I remember her saying, you have to make them think, you have to make them laugh and think that you're done with the joke and then hit them again. And I'm like 11 going, yes, I get that. I get that.
but it's funny what you said about you didn't want silence, and I was the same way when I started. I would if I could do a 30-minute set and I could get laughs for 95% of it, but I would be depressed about that 5% where I was working with comics who were like, oh well, at least I didn't talk during my set, and I'm like, yeah, that's not the idea. They're supposed to laugh. But for you, because the thing is also, so because you do so many jokes, like you're like John Mendoza does a ton of jokes. You do a ton of jokes. How do you remember them all? And I mean, not, and that's like, because me, I don't know if it happens to you, especially when you're younger, when you're used to getting that laugh, and when one does it. And Jeff Martyr used to always make fun of me when he'd see me do this. He said, I could tell by your body language, you went. No one else could tell, but you started getting frantic because no one laughed at that one joke. How?
Right.
I mean, did that ever happen to you? But you have so many jokes. I mean, what was it like when you were starting out? Was it hard to remember them? And how did you react if you didn't get a laugh on one joke? Because you get so used to it, and your act is something where it always gets laughs.
Well, now if I don't get a laugh, I just go on to the next joke. But I think what you're saying is like at the beginning, it must be really hard to live through that silence. And yeah, there were times that I quit just because I couldn't take it. And now I just talk through it. Um, but I did a show the other night at this new club in San Diego called the Yellow Door. It's National Lampoon, and I think they're going national. Um, and I felt like I was on stage at the beginning of my career in that the audience laughed at like it was the 80s when do you remember the 80s? Like everybody was so happy to be in a comedy club.
Setups would get laughs.
I
Like
know.
you'd be
And
doing a setup, and they'd start laughing. You're like, no, this isn't the punchline. This isn't the punchline.
it felt like that. So yeah, that felt good. But there are times like I don't know if you did Zoom shows during the pandemic where no, you didn't do them. There were some Zoom shows, they were configured differently. Like sometimes you could hear the audience laugh, sometimes they had half the audience laugh, sometimes they had just the audience on mute. So I got used to just telling the jokes and imagining that I would be getting laughs or watching somebody laugh, but not being able to hear them. It's a different experience, but like we learn or everybody in their life learns different skills based on their job that they didn't know that they were going to have to learn prior to the job. Like you and I had to learn to travel and to do radio and, all these things that were the other parts of doing stand-up. It's not just getting on stage and telling jokes.
Now, do you still get nervous? Because you've been doing it a long time. I get antsy before I go on stage, and I use it to my advantage. But I'm always afraid that I'm just going to forget everything, and I'm going to go up
Oh
there.
yeah, you
I'm
asked about that before, and I forgot that you asked that. As I've gotten older, Steve, I'm like, I can't fucking remember my jokes. And I have so many of them that aren't connected. Like I wish I told stories. I was supposed to be in Jonesboro, Missouri. No, Jonesboro, Tennessee, 2 weeks ago. Because I don't know if you know, but Jonesboro, Tennessee is the world storytelling center. And once a year they have a festival about storytelling, and they invited me to perform. It got canceled because of the rains and the storms, because people couldn't get into the festival because a lot of the area around it was decimated. God bless those people. Um, but I actually wrote a story that I was going to tell, and I realized I could do this if I want to, not just have a joke here and a joke there, one about my mother and one about my hair, But this was a story about me getting hit by a car. And it's not really funny, but there were funny things that happened as a result. So I wrote this story and I'm going to try to perform it. And I don't know how you feel about, like, there are some comedians who really don't think it's professional to bring notes on stage. But I go, well, it's not like I'm on TV. I should be able to have notes with me. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
My feeling is I only perform like once every month. I host a show. I have a notebook, and the way I get around it is they'll go into a bit and I go, my friend's a therapist. And I go, well, he's not a therapist. He went to community college and took a psychology class. And then I go into, if I was going to get a therapist, I go to Groupon because I got my proctologist from Groupon and I got 3 fingers for the price of 2. And he said, you have to deal with your anger. So he told me to write a journal. So I have this book and there's 10 jokes. So I can look at them and I go to the crowd and this is my journal. And so then I do it. My feeling is this, you know what? Like you said, you're not on TV. Okay. You've been on TV. Okay. You've been on the Tonight Show. Okay. You can do what the fuck you want. Okay. You've had a Showtime special. It's not like you're some kid coming up, which bothers me when the guys come up with just like a crappy sweatshirt and like ripped jeans and they're coming up with their notes and they're just reading off their phone. No, for you, if you're telling a story, no one really cares. And I think that's something that I don't care if there's notes, unless you have your head in it like the whole time, which you wouldn't do because you're a professional. You're not going to sit there and be like, oh, okay, hi, I'm telling the joke behind
right. But I guess my question is, because I do have like a conceit like that, like a journal. I said, this woman came up to me after a show and she said, I listened to your jokes, but I don't really know who you are. So I wrote down a list of things to tell her who I am if she's here at this show too. And I would say things like, I am lactose tolerant. I can always tell, or I can usually tell when a man is undressing me with his hands. Silly things, but they're jokes, but I wouldn't necessarily remember them. So my question to you is, do I need to then memorize those?
No.
Some point.
Well,
Some point.
Well,
like this comedian hippie man in John Novosad in Denver, he used to carry a clipboard on stage and you just go, okay, all right.
Well, I think, but if you say, you can always have those written down and you can say exactly what you told me. Some lady told me after a show that I don't know you. And so I wrote all these things down. And I think that works because then you're breaking the third wall. And it's also, people are going to want to laugh more because they're going to think that lady's a jerk for coming up and saying,
right.
Oh, I really don't know you. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not, most comics, especially when we started, they didn't tell you their life story. I mean, I work with comics who would say they were single and they'd take their wedding ring off on stage and, they were trying to get laid and they'd have the tan belt line, because they're by the pool. But no, so I just think for you though, right. It's because you do so many jokes. And the thing is, as we do get older, we lose our memory. I mean, I always sit there. That's how I get that whole bit. I also say, I forget to pull my zipper up. And I said, and that's very embarrassing when you're at Chuck E. Cheese and when you don't have kids. And then people groan and I go, I'm not a pedophile. I just look like one. So I get out of that way. But I put early on that you can't, my memory. And I think now it's a different ball game. I don't think people like when we started out, you started a little before me, you never went on. You memorized everything. I mean, when you started out, I want to talk about memorization. Okay. How old were you when you did your first Tonight Show? It was with Johnny, right?
Yes, it was 1991. So I was 30. But I was going to say that I do one other like thing where I have index cards where I go, look, I've been doing this for 40 years and I have so many different opening jokes. I didn't know which one to open with. So can I read some of them to you? And you tell me which one I should open with. And then I'll start by saying, somebody just hugged me so hard, I can skip my next mammogram, or somebody just asked me to throw out the first ball at a bowling tournament in Bakersfield, things like that. And so, so I was 30, but you also asked me before, and I don't want to forget this, that you asked me if I still get nervous. And I do, especially now, because I used to perform like 1 or 2 times a night. And now I perform like you, 2 or 3 times a month. And I host a lot of shows. My show, I do locally grown comedy. And so it's a different experience. And but I still do get nervous because I perform more infrequently. I think when you're doing it all the time, it's just you're in a groove, I think, and not as aware. When I first started performing, Steve, I was sleep deprived because I had a day job and then a night job. I had a day job as an administrative assistant, and then I did stand up at night. So I had like 2 sets of clothes, and I was so exhausted, but I think it worked to my advantage in the same way that some comedians drank before they went on stage. I was so tired. It was like my filters were down. So I think that worked to my advantage. Also, I was funnier in that I didn't have like a censor as much as I do now. So
I want to ask you, we'll get to the Tonight Show, but tell me more about the homegrown comedy. I was so funny. You finally had booked me, and I was all excited because you always had killer, and you still do. You have killer lineups. Is it still at Vitello's?
It is. I'm taking a break right now because I found myself as a producer, like I always wanted to pay the comedians, and I always lost money, and I just needed to take a break because it's exhausting. I loved doing it because it's like it kept me in the game kind of, and I love meeting comedians and watching them grow. That sounded so corny. But I love watching comedians. I love laughing. Like that's one of the reasons I started stand-up. I love to laugh myself. I think I was really depressed when I first started doing stand-up, and laughing is so healthy. And I would just go to a show every night, even if I wasn't performing. And yeah, I love laughing. So anyway, so you were booked on my show.
And then we were moving, and I had to cancel. And I was bummed because I was like, you finally booked me. And then and it was like 4 months in advance. Then we decided we're going to move. I'm like, damn it. Because you always, you've had Arsenio Hall there. Who are some of the people that have been to, and Vitello's, it's not like it's a big comedy, but it's a cool space. But who are some of the people that have been on locally grown? You've had some, I think Larry Wilmore was just on.
Larry Wilmore, Nikki Glazer did it once. John Maloney did it. Mulaney did it once. Tig Notaro, Eliza Schlesinger. Pretty much George Lopez. I had a lot of comedians on my show.
Do you think?
And then I had people like Hannah Einbinder before she was famous.
In Hacks.
Cristela Alonso and Taylor Tomlinson before she was famous. So I feel like, I've watched them all grow up.
Well, do you think that they're probably so excited because I know you're very humble, but you are a legendary comic, and and a groundbreaker and a female. Because when you were, I try to tell people, like, when I started comedy in '88, and the Comedy Factory outlet and the Comedy Works, it was a list of like 25 people, and there was maybe 3 women. There was no one. It was like, and it was different. And
this was in Colorado?
In Philly. No, Philadelphia. I
In
started in
Philly, right?
Philadelphia.
That's right.
And we only had 3.
Comedy Works.
And so,
Okay.
and you were in Boston, and Boston was a very male, Lenny Clark, Dennis Leary, like the hardcore males. So I think a lot of these females, when they sit there, they look as you as a role model. I mean, do you ever think that, or are you too humble to notice that? Because it's hard to sit there and go, oh yes, I'm a role model. They look at me as mentors, but you have to think like you paved some paths for people. And before it was you, it was Elaine Boozler. Then it was you, and it was Kathy Ladman. And so, I mean, do you ever think about that and go, God damn, times have changed? Like, it would have been, I mean, how do you think would it be for you now if you started out now?
One of the things that I remember when I first started was I didn't think of myself as a female comedian, which maybe worked to my advantage. But I do have to say that I've had 3 comedians tell me that they saw me on TV and they were like, I want to do that. And now they're very successful. And so that makes me feel like I helped them realize themselves. And that's very humbling. And also I'm so happy about that. I'm not going to say who, because that's humble brag, but yeah, so it feels good. I feel respected by my peers.
Well, you are. Now I want to get back to Tonight Show, because I always, people don't understand how big it was. Like, I know we're both friends. I'm very good friends with Jeff Martyr, and Jeff. And Jeff got the couch when he was only 21, and he was so funny, and he was so brilliant, and he just stopped doing
brilliant.
it. And I'll sit there sometimes, and I'll text him, and I'll go, "Is this funny?" And he'll go, "Yeah." And then he'll go, "Or switch this." And me and Jeff have this thing where we text each other just really bizarre memes, like out of nowhere, and it always makes me laugh, because we never talk on the phone. We text, like, even like with Scheidner after the storms, I text Rick because I worry about them. They were my mentors. Rich and Jeff were my mentors, and so Jeff, and Scheidner, they all did the Tonight Show, and it was so big. What was it like when you did it? Because you said, what year was it?
1991.
Okay, and so that's like when it's still getting a shitload of viewers.
It was a year before he stopped, I think, doing it. Wait, was it 90 or 91? It was May 10th, 1991, and it was surreal. I mean, I still get nervous thinking about it. I'll see pictures of me on the show and I get nervous about it, because it was like I had grown up watching the show. I remember watching a comedian on the show when I was a little girl. Again, it was Phyllis Diller. And I was so nervous for her, Steve, until she got her first laugh. It was like I was living it. And yeah. So being on the show. Oh, and the other thing is, I had this uncle who was very, like, he was a doctor and very well read. And I just always felt like he didn't think much of me until I was on Johnny Carson. And then he was like telling everybody about it. And it just felt good. It felt good.
So what's it like when you get there? Like is the nerves, I mean, did you probably had to work your set all week. Were you working your set, and and did they tell you what?
I probably only had 5 minutes. I probably only had 5 minutes at that point. No, I'd been doing comedy for 6 years, and I think they went over my jokes. And I had 2 friends with me. Ron Lynch came with me, and my friend Amir Golan, and they were just my rocks. And I remember after the show, so Johnny will give you the okay sign or call you over to the couch. Well, he gave me the okay sign, but it wasn't captured on camera. But I saw it. So I was very disappointed, and he heard that I was disappointed. So I'm not making this up. I feel like I'm making up some of my life right now. But he and Ed McMahon came to my dressing room and said, "You were very," and Johnny said, "You were very funny. You'll have to come back." It didn't happen, but I just remember feeling like I was in the next room, like I astral projected myself out of this was it was like a hologram of Johnny Carson, and my my friends Ron and Amir said, "Oh yeah, that just happened." So it was
See,
very
that's
cool.
amazing.
And I remember being on a plane going home because I had a day job. So it was like a Friday, I think, and I had to go home and then work on Monday. And I remember thinking to myself, I could die in this plane now and be okay. And I'm glad I didn't, because I realized like there are other things important in life than being on the Tonight Show. But at that time, it was like the the crown jewel.
Now, how long till you could quit that day job? Because I've heard stories where once you go to the Tonight Show, next thing you know, you're in Vegas, open up for a Holy One Glacis or something like that. What was because I mean, it has to be hard. I interviewed the guy who is the lead guitarist for Warrant, the heavy metal band, and he told me when heavy metal is dying, he got a job working for his father-in-law at like a computer company, and he cut his hair and he didn't tell anybody until one day a guy shows up at work with a picture of with Joey with long hair, no shirt, a bottle of Jack, and two girls under his arm. Like, is there something you want to tell us? But for you,
Oh
after,
my
after
God.
he's like, oh yeah, I used to be in a rock band, we toured the world. But now for you, you go back to your job, but you did the Tonight Show. Did you automatically get a new agent? What happened? I mean, because it's a matter of how do you even go back to a, I know you need money, but how do you even go back to a job when you did the fucking Tonight Show with Johnny Carson?
Well, it was so long ago, but my memory is, I think I remembered this correctly. So, leading up to the Tonight Show, there was a show called 48 Hours. I think they still have it. And they were doing a whole show about stand-up comedy, and I was one of the segments. They were following me at my administrative assistant job at Radcliffe College, and they followed me to open mic nights and to other shows, and it was oh, and part of it, there was a comedy competition run by Bud Friedman and the Improv, and I was on the competition and I won in Boston. So that was part of the segment. And then during that contest, the guy from the Tonight Show came up to me and said, "How come we haven't seen you?" His name was Jim McCauley. And I said, "I don't know. I mean, I've been in Boston for 6 years. I don't know why you would have seen me." And he goes, "Would you like to do the show?" And so they caught that on 48 Hours. And so after that, I some agents courted me, and I'm still with the agent that I had then, but my agent now represents people like Dave Chappelle and Jamie Foxx and Kevin Nealon, and yeah, so that's big time. I know where I stand. I never reached that level, but I honestly feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. You know, I got married and raised my stepkids, and so I didn't really have that drive to be a huge comedian. Does that make sense?
It does, and I stopped doing it, but at one point I think you do start missing it, but I'm like I'm lazy. Like if someone says like the show I host, and this will air after I host it once a month at this really new hip venue. I met the owner. It's got 2 levels. It's a beautiful place. It's called Soundplex Studios.
What's it
It's
called?
Soundplex Studios. And there's a down. We started doing it called Speakeasy Stand. It was upstairs in the back. There's a room. Doesn't have a liquor license. We have wine tasting. We have a piano player. And now the downstairs was mostly for music, but we did it there with Dina Blizzard, who's a very big comic around here. And it was great. So, but it's only 15 minutes for me. You know, and another guy I know, I said, hey, I'm doing a guest set for him Friday. And it's like, well, it's 20 minutes and I can take Joanne and we'll get dinner. And, you know, and so for me, I get lazy now. Like if someone says, hey, you want to do the show? I'm like, how far is it? And I'm like, an hour? I don't want to drive an hour. I mean, do you get that way at all?
I know. I do. I do. I mean, I do a lot of benefits and I love doing those because I feel like I'm doing something for good. But yes, I don't like driving far or being away. That's what I don't like being away from my husband and my dogs. But what I wanted to tell you was because I wanted to invite you to do Locally Grown if you're ever here, and I'm doing it again. But in the meantime, I've done one and I'm doing my second one in December. I always had this image that I wanted to do a sing-along. So I found these two world-class musicians, Bill Sinkay and Jeff Allen Ross. They played with Neil Diamond, and they play with Peter Asher, and Jeff Allen Ross played with Badfinger in the second incarnation. And so they're friends, and they backed me up on piano and guitar. This was at Vitello's. We sang 16 songs, everything from Beatles to show tunes. I gave out lyrics. I gave out castanets and kazoos. It was like this whole night of singing along. It was the most fun I've ever had as a comedian. I mean, I told jokes in between, and yeah.
And I saw you something. I was wondering how that worked, but that is a great idea. And now what you need is your mom to come out and do the drum solo like she did in your Showtime special.
Yeah, my mother played the drums at my wedding. You're so funny.
Now, real quick,
but I'm doing another one in December.
Okay, so is it the same musicians? The same guys?
What?
Is it the same musicians on your next one?
Same guys. Yeah, same guys.
Different songs or same songs?
We're going to sing a bunch of holiday songs.
And where's it going to be?
Because it's going to be at Vitello's, December 18th.
So that's exciting. That is fun. You know, that's the thing. People need more fun. People need to get out. You know, if it's not comedy, it's something like that. And you have to think outside the box. Like our show tomorrow, because I've interviewed so many people, the owner is really interesting. And what he's done to the Soundplex is amazing. So I'm doing a Q&A with him for like 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh.
And then I'm going to do 15 minutes of stand-up. And then I have a girl, I've never seen her act, but her cousin hangs out at the Soundplex, and she'll bring some people. So we're going to have her do a guest set. Then I have a guy, Coleman Green, headlining it. And before the show, I said, there's a piano player and there's wine tasting. We have a guy who has a wine company. So it's something different, because I think people, you get tired of the comedy clubs sometimes, but like what you're doing is there's jokes and you have fun. But now you also said before on air, you have a podcast now. Is that true?
I do. We haven't launched it yet, but my friend Nancy Cohen, who is a comedy writer for shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Kate and Al, not Kate and Allie, I'm blanking on the name, but she's married to a comedian that I knew from Boston, who his name was Brian Fraser. And so I've gotten to know her really well, and we're not friends, we're acquaintances. And I thought, when I was thinking, like, who do I want to do a podcast with, she came to mind. And so the conceit is that it's in the middle of the night, it's really late, and it's called Who's Up with Wendy and Nancy. This is our logo. I don't know if you can see it. Who's Up?
Okay.
With Wendy and Nancy. And we've recorded 9, and we're just about to launch it on, all the podcast platforms. So we're very excited about it. And it's just us talking
but
every week.
What are you talking about? Do you go in?
No, we just chit chat. I didn't hear what you just said.
No, I said, how long are the episodes?
They're 25 minutes. And we started recording, we had guests, and then we realized we were more comfortable just talking to each other. And we talk about everything from like I went to see Joni Mitchell the other night at the Hollywood Bowl, and it was divine, except there were people behind me talking the whole time, and it was exhausting.
Isn't that the worst? And, I don't get it. It's like, don't go to a show if you're going to talk. Don't.
I mean, at one point, this kid who was sitting next to me and I turned around at the same time, and we were like, can you please not talk? And they were like, will you please not talk? Like, they were obnoxious about it. And I'm like, I wanted to see Joni Mitchell. Anyway, she was great. And she had, it was amazing.
I took Joanne to see Springsteen for the first time. She had never seen Springsteen. So we're at Citizens Bank in Philly, and we're sitting there, and there's an empty seat, and there's a couple. And then this guy sits by himself, and then all of a sudden this concert's starting, and he says, medical emergency. He looked like a doctor. I thought he was a doctor. He leaves. He never comes back. It turns out the guy sitting next to him was having a stroke. The guy like one seat over. And so all of a sudden the paramedics came in, and me being selfish, I'm like, I'm missing No Surrender. Come on. But it was just, I was sitting, I'm like, and then I'm looking, and I said to Joanne, joking, I go, I don't think he took a sip of his beer. He's not going to be drinking it. And she's like, don't you take it. And I said, okay. But it sucks. I mean, but isn't it weird? Like that concert, why are you going to go see Joni Mitchell if you're going to talk during it? Shut up. She's a legend. Any concert. I mean, the worst is the people who whistle. The whistlers drive me crazy.
Well, two people were talking in Italian. And at one point I turned around and I said, what? And he was like, what? What do you mean? And I said, oh, I thought you were talking to me, because he was so loud. And then it just kind of was exhausting listening to them say, she's not playing Court and Spark. She's not playing Blue. And it was very frustrating. But anyway, so we talk about everything from that to like COVID to voting. We talk about everything. We talk about going to sleep and ironing. Well, it's really exciting.
Talking about, I'm going to talk back to comedy real quick about writing. Has your writing style changed? And did the accident affect you? Because I know you were bedridden for a while, and it was a very hard time. Did that change your writing style? Did it give you a different look? Like, I know for me, when I went through my heart things, it changed my outlook a lot. I wasn't a curmudgeon anymore. I was nice, but I was nice.
I've noticed.
Joanne changed me. I was a curmudgeon before her. But did that change your writing style at all, or did that change your look on life? Because I remember when you went through that, it was, and I talked to you right after that. It was a hard time in your life.
What it changed was, they say the bones have to knit themselves back together. And my situation was complicated because they put the rod in incorrectly. So they had to redo it 6 months later. So it was longer than it should have been. But I felt like my friendships were knitting themselves together at the same time. So it changed me in a way that I felt loved, in a way that I hadn't felt loved before. And I was exhausted before that. I had been traveling for so many years. And so it was a necessary break for me, no pun intended. But I was hit by a car. And my writing style has changed, Steve, in really since I started doing the joke prompts. Like, I try to think from every angle. Actually, my father-in-law's brother, my uncle-in-law, my father-in-law and his brother are the Sherman brothers, who wrote a lot of the music for Disney. And my uncle-in-law, Richard Sherman, who just passed away recently, he said, you have to think of something and then pivot and think of something even better. And I really took that to heart. And so I try to write a joke and then say, what am I missing here? And I try to write like even better. So doing it a lot, like all the writing books say you should write every day at the same time. I don't know if that's necessary, but just letting your mind go into that space, the flow. And so by doing it in public, I feel like I have to be creative myself. And some of the jokes that I post, I had written before, but there are a lot that I just have to come up with new ones. I just read a great book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And it's really interesting. It's all about creativity. And yeah, I'm recommending that.
Now, do you
also recommending Beth Lapidus's book.
Who?
Do I still have Beth Lapidus?
Oh, she did Cooper Talk back when you did it. She was on in the early days too. I reached out to her on Facebook and I said, because she does on Cabaret and she
started on Cabaret.
Yeah. And so she was on. It's so funny. I reached out to so many of you, and it was like, I remember I reached out to Jordan Brady, and he did it, and he goes, reach out to Scheidner. And I remember I reached out to Scheidner, and I get a call, Scheidner, and I knew him because of the New Jersey angle. And it was just amazing that I look back, like Maron did my show. I remember him, Mark Maron did my show, Paul Tompkins, Blaine Capash, you, Kathy Ladman, Jan Karam, Tracy, Heather McDonald, all these people. I remember you were on as far as Flying Back East on one day. I had Heather McDonald, you, Marilyn Reichkup, and David Allen, big blonde actor, but it was 4 people, and I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I got all this talent, and it was just, I was like, wow, and it was just amazing. But so what's coming up for you? Are you still having a lot of fun doing stand up, or would you want to focus more on the podcast or to sing along? Because after a while it loses it sometimes.
Right. I don't know what's next for me, except that I'm always doing something different, like writing a musical or writing a novel. I have my fingers in a lot of different things. I still would love to be an actress. I did have an audition to play Timothy Chalamet's mother. I don't think I got it, but it was still so fun to fantasize about that.
How did you prep for the audition? I want to hear this. How did you prep? How did you get ready?
So they told me, I was in a hotel room, actually. I was working in Wisconsin, and I had like a day to do it. And they said there were no sides. There was no script. They just said, make it really, like, don't try to get in a studio. Just make it very natural, like turn on the regular lights, whatever. And they said, just have a conversation with your son. And they gave me some parameters. And then they gave me some questions, like what was the last dream I had? And so there was like an interview part, even though I'm just talking to my iPhone. And then the audition, which was the improv. And it was the first time I didn't hate what I had done. Like, I really loved doing it and got into it. And so
I think you should do some local
theater. I haven't
theater.
Heard back, but
you should do some local theater.
Really?
I bet you would crush it. I think because you already have the stand-up chops. You've played in front of huge crowds. You played in the Tonight Show. You've been on stage more than most theater people. Back in the day, you were doing like 7-8 shows a week for years. So I think you should sit there and you should find a theater company and you should go and do that. And that's what I think you should do, Wendy Liebman. I think you should do, because you want to act, but you can tell you want to act. And I think it will come easy to you because, as I said, stand-ups are a different breed. Like, stand-ups can go to acting better than actors can go to stand-up. I mean, it's quite obvious with Robin Williams and just the whole, Christina Alfonso when she go to the
Howie
show.
Mandel.
Yeah, Howie Mandel. I think it's an easy transition. So I think that's what Wendy Liebman is going to act. I want to see you in the next year. I want to see you in a production in LA somewhere. So that's my challenge. That's my challenge to you,
or on
Wendy
Abbott
Liebman.
Elementary.
Exactly. Joanne loves that show. So any shows coming up? Any shows coming up?
Any shows coming up? Well, I'm at the Improv tomorrow night in Los Angeles, and then I do a bunch of private shows in LA, so I'm doing those. But yeah, nothing that I can promote. But check out my Facebook page and play along with my joke prompts. It's really fun.
It is fun. And are you still
so
on
glad
Twitter?
that you like it.
You're still on Threads,
I'm on
right?
Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I am. I'm on Threads. I'm on Instagram. I have a website, wendyliebman.com, that I designed and did myself. And I have a lot of jokes on there and pictures. Do
you have a link to the Showtime special? Do you have the link to the Showtime special? How can we find that? Your special from 3 years ago?
I do. And also I did another Showtime special, Even More Funny Women of a Certain Age. And that's probably one of my favorite clips ever. And that's on my website. It's 10 minutes. And the show was produced by Carol Montgomery, a really funny comedian from New York. But also check out Who's Up with Wendy and Nancy.
All right. Well, I'm so
soon
glad
to be
you
on
came
all platforms.
I'm so glad you came on.
Thank you for having me.
And so people, please go check out Wendy. Go watch her stand up. She's funny. You can check me out. Well, no, this will air next month. Follow me on Facebook. It's Corks Comedy and Connections. It's networking. It's wine. It's piano playing. It's comedy at the hippest joint around. You can go to YouTube, and I have a business podcast called The Coop Tank, where I moderate 3 local business people, and we just talk about local business motivations and things like that. Also, don't forget coopertalk.net. I just posted an episode with my good friend Paul Ben Victor, who's in that new show with Kristen Bell and Adam Brody. He plays Adam Brody's father. Paul's been in everything. So you can check out.
Yeah.
Paul's been around forever. Go to coopertalk.net. There's 1,026 episodes there. And you can always email me at coopertalk.net. And once again, I want to thank Jimmy Corhan and Comedy Trainwreck. They have so many great shows. Go follow them. Go follow them on YouTube. Go follow them on Facebook, on Twitter, all that, and watch their show and keep supporting live entertainment. And I'm Steve Cooper. And just so you know, when you watch this, I have a filter on and I look like I'm made of wax today. So anyway, you all have a wonderful, wonderful night. And thank you for watching and listening.
You're the best.
Coop's Comedy Corner.